Rumor has it that the Vikings are so high on J.J. McCarthy that you might have to trade up just to get him and get past the Vikings. What do we make of that? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, everybody. What's up? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we are always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers. Those of you who do flip on this show every single day, I appreciate y'all so very much. If you are new here and you're looking for some QB rumors, some Kirk Cousins information, you've come to the right place. Welcome in. You can, of course, find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is an audio listening app like SiriusXM or on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, we're going to talk a little more rumor mill because this thing won't die. I think we are going to get an answer like down to the deadline, even though it kind of feels like the answer might already be out there. It still, I guess, behooves all parties involved to push it to the last minute and see if something drastic changes in their favor. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. So we will talk a bit about Kirk Cousins and Atlanta. And in particular, how the reporting around that is getting kind of saucy. We've got a source off going on. So we'll try to parse that out. But I want to actually flip my attention to the rookies a little bit. Now, in terms of evaluating these rookies and my scouting on these rookies, at least what I can do in terms of scouting quarterbacks, we've gone over that on Locked On Vikings in the not so distant past. So you can find those shows if you just want to hear what I think about Drake May or what I think about J.J. McCarthy or any of those guys. You can just go find that episode. Today, I'm going to spend my time focusing on what we heard about these guys at the combine and why we maybe heard that. And the thing that was everywhere, and I can't cite like a person who reported this because everybody reported some version of either the Vikings are really into JJ McCarthy, JJ McCarthy is going higher than you think, something like that. The idea of, and maybe you disagree, and that's perfectly valid. If you think that J.J. McCarthy is a second round player, the draft isn't going to match you, but it doesn't have to match you. You can still definitely hold to that. And if he flames out, you can say, look, I was smarter than the NFL. Take that victory lap. That's always very fun. But for the league, kind of feels like this dude's going top 10, maybe even top 5. Like maybe someone trades up for him, which I think is stunning to a lot of people that just don't see JJ McCarthy's skill set as worth that. And even though like I consider myself pretty high on McCarthy, I like McCarthy. Top 5 is rich. Like I already kind of thought picking him at 11 is like probably higher than he should go. But at the same time, with a quarterback, overpaying for a quarterback that turns out to be your franchise guy, you're not going to care about that like extra 3rd round pick you had to throw into the trade package. That's going to get totally washed away. So whatever, right? Overpay if you have to, but you'd rather overpay than not get him. But if you don't like JJ McCarthy and then the idea that they're going to trade a bunch of picks up for him, like, yeah, that might send you into a spiral. So here's what I'll say. Whether that report is true or not is never going to be something that I will be able to know because that's not what I do here. I'm not a sourced up reporter. You can listen to like the Strib guys talk about that. And although I don't think that they talked much about the actual draft quarterbacks and like who they're high on or not in the latest Access Vikings, if I recall. But even that, which would be like sourced journalism, is still going to necessarily be really vague, right? Yeah, they're high on this guy. Maybe they like him. Maybe they don't like him. But do they like him more than so-and-so? How much are they going to trade up for him? All that stuff is going to be kept very close to the chest. So the best I think that we can do is to try to suss out exactly why we hear what we hear. Because certain like narratives at the combine felt very pushed. at least from my perspective, which is a very unique perspective that is just mine, and your perspective is just yours. But it really felt like we wanted to see, like someone wanted us to hear that everyone's really high on JJ McCarthy, or that someone's really high on JJ McCarthy, or that the Vikings specifically are really high on JJ McCarthy. And I guess the way that I like to approach these questions is, who wants me to know that? Or who wants who to know that, right? Like who are we trying, who is who talking to? And kind of trying to answer both halves of that question. Like, who would want that information out there that everyone's really high on JJ McCarthy, right? And my default answer is usually like someone who's trying to draft the other quarterback, right? You want everybody to think, maybe everybody's kind of even on McCarthy and May, or McCarthy and Daniels, whichever one like doesn't go 1-2 with Caleb Williams up in Chicago. So it's somebody who's like targeting one of those other quarterbacks, hoping that you can get the other quarterback needy teams to think that JJ McCarthy is more highly regarded than he is. So who would we want to think that if it was the Vikings? So let's say the Vikings were the ones that were leaking this everywhere. How would it benefit them if everybody thought the world was really high on JJ McCarthy and everybody thought they were really high on JJ McCarthy? Well, let's say you're the Raiders, and you're looking at trading up for a QB, and you're going, all right, let's say Drake May falls to, let's say the number 1 and number 2 are Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. And let's say Drake May is number 3. And you want Drake May and you want to get up to get him. And you're going, but I heard the Vikings were really into JJ McCarthy. So maybe they're not as much of a threat as we think. And then maybe you're just a little bit slower to pick up the phone. And maybe that opens up a window for the Vikings to pick up the phone and strike and move up to 3 instead, which was also a rumor coming out of the combine. That's the kind of thing that I think I'm looking for here. This is all total tinfoil hat musing. But when it comes to the draft and the stuff that you hear, whether or not you agree with it or it makes sense to you, you're hearing it for a reason. Someone wants you to know it. Now, with McCarthy himself, I also kind of get it. And there's always the chance, like the other version of this, is that a rumor starts to leak when it is such a certain thing that there's no point to keeping it a secret anymore. I remember when Jalen Reagor got traded to the Vikings a couple years ago, and 3 or 4 hours before the trade actually got like announced by Ian Rappaport and became part of the news cycle, you started to see a whole bunch of little leaks pop up. Because it is at that point, it's getting processed. Terms are agreed to. There's no advantage to keeping it a secret. So everybody texts all their friends and says, hey, this is what's happening, right? And eventually that finds its way to like social media. I kind of think that's happening with Caleb Williams right now with the Bears, where it's like there's no world where Chicago's trading down. And the world where they are trading down probably has to be like the Bears would want that to be negotiated under the impression that they intend to take Caleb Williams and that they're not trying to trade down. You want someone to give you the packages that like moves you off of that, right? So there's like no reason for the Bears to keep their intentions too like tightly kept, right? So it makes sense that it would leak out a little bit, but then there's these like they're almost like propaganda campaigns. Or it could be sincere. It could be that the Vikings really, really like JJ McCarthy. And look, I would get it. Especially, I mean, the thing that reporters seem to be trying to brace you for is the world where JJ McCarthy goes above Drake May. And that's the other end of this is it feels like there's a lot of buzz that the league isn't as high on Drake May as you would think, which coming into this past college football season would have been unthinkable. He and Caleb Williams were clearly the 1 and the 2. And now it feels like May is falling down a little bit more. Chris Sims did his QB rankings, which are always, we'll go with hit or miss. But Drake May was like at the bottom of those. But it's not just like some guy on TV trying to get eyeballs. It's again, kind of seems more deliberate than that. So what gives? We'll get into that next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your car and keep that thing running. It is how you get from point A to point B, and your car is an extension of yourself. It's one of the ways you express yourself, just like the clothes you wear, the way that you talk, the thing you drive, that's kind of part of your life. So take good care of that thing, and whether it's customizing it with like a cool LED headlight or something like that, or something that you need to keep that thing running, eBay Motors has you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your car, and you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and it'll fit your car the first time, every time, or your money back. That is the eBay guaranteed fit. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime, which is the best place to get last-minute tickets to anything, whether it is a sporting event, you want to sneak in a Timberwolves game while they're getting hot, or a Wild game or whatever, or even concerts, live theater, whatever, a comedy show, whatever you can find. They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, even up to an hour into the event. And let me tell you, when you get to that close, sometimes deals can crop up just from people looking to get rid of those tickets who are worried they won't be able to at all. That's how Gametime operates, and that's how they will find you the best deal on the market. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. That is the Gametime guarantee. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. When you're done here, go check out the 24/7 streaming channel at Locked On Minnesota Sports. Locked On Minnesota Sports, all things Minnesota sports all day long. Flip that thing on while you work, listen to it in the background, and stay up to date on all the biggest stories all around the world of Minnesota sports. So let's move on to the Drake May part of this. So this is a little bit quieter, but it's still around a lot. There's just a lot of reporting that, teams aren't as high on Drake May as you think. They don't like his mechanics as much as they maybe like J.J. McCarthy's mechanics. Like, what gives? What's the deal? That probably is not going to at all match what we will see by like the time we have a true consensus and everyone has their draft guides out and like Arif Hassan will do his consensus board and all that stuff. Once we have that, I'm going to guess that J.J. McCarthy will not be above Drake May, but to some places in the league, he might be. Look, draft scouting is one of those things where you will just find weird opinions all over the place. Every take exists, right? There's somebody out there who's like ride or die for Bo Nix. It happens. Who's for Joe Milton, right? Like that nobody thinks is a first round guy. And so I think for one, I think it's good to be humble here. Like, look, as much as I think I'll probably defend J.J. McCarthy more than attack him, I still have Drake May over him. Like, I'm not going against the crowd on that one. But I get it. Like, I understand it. And if we're looking back 3 years from now going, my goodness, how did anyone have Drake May over J.J. McCarthy? Because that's just how it worked out. Like, it certainly wouldn't be the first time something like that happened, right? Why would somebody be higher on J.J. McCarthy than Drake May? I think it is an important thing to be able to train your brain to think from the perspective of somebody who disagrees with you. I think that's a really important thing to learning. And it really bugs me that during draft season, we don't get a lot of that. You get people who will argue about prospects, and that sort of spirited debate, like that can be a lovely thing as long as it's respectful, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to most of the conversation that I see, it's like, God, how can anybody see this in JJ? I don't see it. How can anybody see it? And it's so presumptive. I try not to do that. And I'll fall into that trap. I think I'm falling into that trap with Chop Robinson. I just love him a lot. But even with Chop Robinson, who I'm super, super high on, I still at least like revere the chance that I just am missing something huge, or I'm just not putting enough stock into like his measured weight at all, or anything like that. Like maybe that's just, or there's some nuance to defensive line play that everybody knows that I don't, and I'm just totally missing it. Maybe this will be my chance to learn it. Like that's a possibility. It always is a possibility. So loosely hold those opinions, folks, and be ready to have your mind changed on things. You have to this time of year. You just have to. So with McCarthy and May mechanics, the biggest thing to me is footwork in the pocket. And so what do I mean by that? When Drake May is in the pocket, he likes to drift. And sometimes these drifts are targeted at finding a different throwing lane or a throwing angle. Sometimes, to me at least, I think he just wants to be on the move because he's more comfortable throwing on the move and with the mechanics that throwing on the move employs, probably because he did it. I'm going to guess throughout all of his high school career and his college career, he was throwing on the move a lot. He scrambles a lot. He makes a lot of like improv plays. This is why he gets all the Josh Allen comparisons, because he's this like huge runaround quarterback, right? And honestly, I don't think that they're wrong. This is the kind of, I mean, Allen was way more chaotic as a prospect, but like you see why it evokes that with people. But the thing that he does is when he drifts, like that can be very effective to just sort of, slide your way 6 inches to the left so that pressure isn't going to be quite in your face the same way and then step into the throw. But for him, when he drifts, he throws on the run. He will employ on the move throwing mechanics as though he is flushed entirely out of the pocket. There is not like, I'm just going to rescue this pocket. It's always, okay, now I'm going to throw on the run. And some coaches might not like that. They might look at that and say, that's a bad habit, because it's just as good as he is at throwing on the run. You're never, ever, ever going to be better at that than you are from a nice, clean, easy pocket, the way it's going to show up at the pro day or whatever. Compare that to McCarthy. When McCarthy is trying to rescue a pocket, for one, he's way better at staying within the parameters of that pocket. The thing about like taking off is it's really hard to take like running steps and not just get past where your tackle is and then bring the edge rusher right into your face. It's really hard to do that. And May creates his own pressure a lot, as much as not to absolve the UNC O-line, which had its issues. Some of those issues were on the quarterback. And with McCarthy, you'll see sort of similar problems. Oh, there's a guy coming up the B gap. My center's getting beat, that kind of thing. And he will keep his feet wide, which is what you want to see. You want to, kind of preserve that base, be on that base for as many milliseconds as possible, so that when the throwing window does open, when you do get to make your decision, because that's where your brain is, right? Like you're looking downfield, you're seeing stuff, you're not thinking about your feet. These should be muscle memory. And so we get to see what kind of habits are their muscle memory. And for Drake May, it's running, it's abandoning that base, maybe throwing off that platform. And then with McCarthy, it's, he keeps that base. He's in the habit of keeping that base. I could see a QB coach really finding that important and saying, okay, that's one thing I just don't have to fix with you. That's something I don't have to talk to you about for training camp. You just have that. And now we can focus that much more time on you learning the playbook and getting ready to go. So I get it. Now there is just the question of raw talent, which Drake May obviously runs away with that particular category. And now you're getting to a point of, what do you prioritize? Do you prioritize that raw talent, that just, arm strength ability? And with McCarthy, I don't know if I'd even call it arm strength. I think some of the passes that die on him are more mechanical than they are like physically, just like not having enough muscle. But regardless, if you are the actual NFL team that's going to have to mold this guy into an NFL player, are you more worried about the physical tools that have nothing to do with what you can and can't teach them? Or are you worried about how long that developmental path will be before that person gets in? That might be the thing. Do you agree with it? You don't have to. I don't think I necessarily agree with it. But again, we're trying to see it from the perspective of someone who disagrees with us. It's a very important, mental task. So that's where that is. Let's move on to the pros here, and I'll keep you updated on the Kirk Cousins situation and sort of what's going on with all this Atlanta stuff, and maybe what the holdup is. Today's episode is sponsored by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info, claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Moving into the pro rumor circuit here on Locked On Vikings. So over this whole week, we've been covering the rumor that has dominated the news cycle in Minnesota, which is that Kirk Cousins is flirting heavy with Atlanta. Flirting with everybody, but flirting especially with Atlanta. The reporting is sort of coagulated into a more focused sentence in the Atlanta market, which is that Kirk Cousins is Atlanta's number one priority, which is a much nicer thing to say than Kirk Cousins and Atlanta probably have a deal worked out and they're just waiting to see if the Vikings match it, because they're not supposed to have done that yet. But I kind of feel like maybe that's what they did, and that's how it works. We talked a lot about tampering in a show earlier this week, but it doesn't bug me. So one of the things that sort of made the rounds on Monday was a report from Mike Florio that Cousins was getting his family ready to move to Atlanta. And I apologize if I get the order of operations mixed up here, but that sort of made the rounds. And that feels like pretty final, right? Like if they're calling realtors, they kind of understand what the deal is going to be. And we're just kind of waiting to find out, right? But there is an immediate problem with that is, even if that were the case, right? Even if Kirk Cousins and Atlanta have hammered out, we'll see, just like the bones of a deal or most of a deal, and they're just waiting to sign on the dotted line, it wouldn't be prudent to like start calling realtors, because there's still a chance that the Vikings surprise me and beat my offer. So even if we grant all that other stuff, it still is like, I don't know how meaningful that is. Or maybe they're just feeling around, right? Like they're just making some phone calls, in which case it's maybe not as serious as it sounds. Regardless, however you take that, Darren Wolfson went on Score North this week and essentially shut down the whole thing and said, yeah, I talked to a source that's, close to the situation, and said that's totally false, blah, blah, blah. Another part of this report was that Kirk Cousins was calling Kyle Pitts, who wears number 8, to talk about that. Kyle Pitts just said, you're making it up, or something like that on Twitter. He's like, you guys will say anything. And actually chimed in about that on Twitter, which is fairly unusual for players. That's usually pretty strong indication that like whatever Florio is talking about isn't happening. But Florio continues to double down. And on his podcast with Chris Sims, he talks about where he got this information. This is jarring to me. You're not supposed to do this as a reporter, is to like sell out where you got information. So this is a wild thing. I have no idea what that means. If that means that he says that Julie Cousins, Kirk's wife, was talking to Mrs. Florio, and that he got into that conversation, and that's where he got that information. So I don't know if that means that like Julie Cousins said like, yeah, it's okay for you to like report that, or if this is just a huge betrayal of that trust. Hard to know, but I don't know which one of those options is crazier either. I love the juicy source off drama that can come out of these sometimes. And when I look at it, it's like, this is why I don't do the sources game. I can't stand that kind of idea of like having to try to be the person who reports things. And then if they do turn out wrong because circumstances change, everybody thinks I'm an idiot and all that. Couldn't stand that world. Never want to be part of that world. So instead, I'll be in the peanut gallery with everybody else and try to parse out exactly what all of this means. And the Atlanta steam is like really, really loud. Again, who wants you to know that, right? So my running theory, I think, stays the same. And it's what I've already said here. It's that Kirk Cousins and Atlanta have a deal, or at least the major blow by blow of a deal in place. And the Vikings have like 5 more days to respond to that. And if they don't, then they don't. So to further like kind of pull reports in on Axis Vikings, Ben Gessling and Andrew Kramer and Michael Rand all have reiterated the same thing that the drum they've been banging this whole time, which is that the Vikings have a line in the sand. It's the line in the sand that they drew last year and that they're not moving it. And that is that we are not going to guarantee you money for 2025. We'll give you through 2024, but once you're 38, I think is what he would be in 25. Once you're 38 years old, we are not going to fully guarantee you seasons. We're anticipating an age decline or whatever it is, with the Achilles and all that. Like there's all that stuff. And that they've been very clear there. That says, this is the deal. And if someone beats it, go and God bless. But, the reporting from like Florio's side again is like sort of combating that in that he is implying that Cousins would be frustrated with this current state of affairs, that Atlanta has, been courting him and has given him an offer, and that the Vikings are like dragging their feet and taking too long to respond, and that he's getting upset about that. This is where we get into really dangerous territory, which is when we start trying to like trust the body language reads of conversations that we weren't in. That's always a little bit sketchy to me. So I won't try to like speculate on the emotional state of Kirk Cousins or his family. But like, I don't know, man, I kind of get it from both sides. If it's starting to get frustrating, like the Vikings might be letting him walk to another team. Yeah. Kind of easy to take that personal. Like I get it. Sure. Maybe you want to set up for a revenge game then, right? Like maybe that's use it as bulletin board material. Go win 13 games with Atlanta and show the Vikings how wrong they were. Like that's totally understandable for that to be the motivation. But also, I don't know if I necessarily buy that that's the dynamic. The Vikings have been very communicative with Kirk Cousins. They have been in dialogue all the time. Kevin O'Connell has confirmed that publicly, that, we talk all the time about this stuff. It's not radio silence. We are having a good, he always says we're having a good dialogue, right? Which is his way of trying not to tell you anything, but at least it's telling you that they're talking. And at no point in this process would I guess that anyone has been like caught off guard or surprised by anything. I think everybody's been pretty clear with each other. This is what we're going to do. And if you can beat it, you can beat it, but we're not going to come up. We're going to do this and only this. Now, if I'm Kirk Cousins or Mike McCarthy's agent, I'm still looking at that deal and saying, okay, thanks Atlanta. We love this, but we're going to see if we can't press Minnesota a little bit and get them to beat it. Right? Like that is just a business savvy move. Why not try to squeeze a couple more bucks out of this and see if you can stay with the same team and all that? And give them as much time as possible to respond. Will the Vikings do it? I don't know. I think it requires a last minute change of heart, but that kind of thing has happened in the past, so wouldn't rule it out. Maybe we'll have huge news to talk about tomorrow. Maybe I'll be making something up to talk about. We'll see. Good luck, everybody. See you tomorrow. And as always, Skull.